Hi, this is Madison. I'm going to read you a story. It's called Mr. Slow. Mr. Slow, as you might well know, Mr. Slow, as you might well know, or maybe you don't, lived next door to Mr. Busy. He built his house himself slowly. It had taken him 10 years. And as you might well know, or maybe you don't, Mr. Slow talked in an extraordinarily slow way. He talked like this. And every single thing he did was as slow as the way he talked. For instance, if Mr. Slow was writing this book about himself, you wouldn't be able to read it yet. He wouldn't even have got as far as this page. For instance, if Mr. Slow was eating a currant cake for tea, it looked him until bedtime. He'd eat it crumb by crumb, currant by currant, cornut by cornut, chewing each crumb and each cornut 100 times. For instance, last Christmas it took Mr. Slow until New Year's Day to open his Christmas presents. And then it took him until Easter to write his thank you letters. Oh, he was a slow man. Now this story isn't about the time Mr. Slow went on a picnic with Mr. Busy. That's another story. No, this story is about the time Mr. Slow decided to get a job. He read all the job advertisements in the Sunday newspaper, which took him until Wednesday, and then he went and got himself a job reading the news on television. Can you imagine? It was very embarrassing. Good evening, said Mr. Slow. Good evening, said Mr. Slow. Here is the 9 o'clock news. It took him until midnight to read it, and everybody who was watching went to sleep, so that job wasn't any good, was it? Then Mr. Slow got himself a job as a taxi driver. Take me to the railway station, cried Mr. Uppity as he leaped into his taxi. I have a train to catch at 3 o'clock. Right, oh, said Mr. Slow, and set off at 1 mile an hour, and arrived at the station at 4 o'clock. So that job wasn't any good, was it? And that summer, Mr. Slow got a job making ice cream. But by the time he'd made an ice cream, it wasn't exactly the right sort of weather to be selling ice cream. So Mr. Slow got himself a job making woolly scarves. But by the time he finished making the scarves, it wasn't exactly the sort of weather to be selling scarves. Phew! Poor Mr. Slow. He went around to ask the other men what he should do. Be a racing driver, suggested Mr. Silly. Can you imagine? No. Can you imagine? No. Be an engineer driver, suggested Mr. Funny. Can you imagine? No. No. Be a speedboat driver, suggested Mr. Tickle. Can you imagine? No, no, no. But then Mr. Happy had an extremely good idea, most sensible. Be a steamroll driver, he suggested, and today is exactly what Mr. Slow does. Slowly backwards and slowly forwards, he drives up and down, down and up, ever so slowly. The next time you see a steamroller doing that, look and see if Mr. Slow is driving it. If he is, you shout to him, "Hello, Mr. Slow, how are you having a nice time? Are you having a nice time?" And he'll wave and shout back to you, "Yes, thank you," he'll shout. "Goodbye." Thank you. And here's another one. Mr. Busy. There has never been anybody quite like Mr. Busy. He could do things 10 times as fast as ever you or I could. For instance, if he was reading this book, he'd have finished it by now. He lived in a very busy-looking house which he built himself. Whoa. As you can see, it had lots of doors and windows. Do you know what it was called? Weekend Cottage. Do you know why? Because that's how long it took him to build it. A weekend. One fine summer morning, Mr. Busy was up and about bright. Oh, sorry. One fine morning, Mr. Busy was up and about bright and early at 6 o'clock. He jumped out of bed and had a bath. He cleaned his teeth and cooked his breakfast, and ate his breakfast and read the paper, and washed up and made his bed and cleaned the house from top to bottom, by which time it was 7 o'clock. Mr. Busy, Mr. Busy. Now, next door to Mr. Busy lived someone who wasn't quite such a busy person. In fact, a very unbusy person. Mr. Slow, which I just read to you. If he was reading this book, he'd read it like this. He'd still be on the first page, and that same fine summer morning at 5:07, when Mr. Busy knocked at his door, Mr. Slow was fast asleep in bed. He'd gone to bed for an afternoon nap the day before, and someone had woken up until he heard Mr. Busy knocking on his door. Who's that knocking at my door? he called downstairs. "Good morning," cried Mr. Busy. "Can I come in?" And without waiting for an answer, he went inside. "Where are you?" he called. "Upstairs," came the surly reply. So Mr. Busy went upstairs 2 at a time. "Good heavens," he said, "you're still in bed." And he made Mr. Slow get up. And he made his bed for him, and cooked his breakfast for him, and cleaned his house for him. Poor Mr. Slow. He hated to be rushed and fussed. Rebecca said, "Right, right," said Mr. Busy briskly. "It's a fine day. Let's go for a picnic." Mr. Slow pulled a face. "I don't like picnics," he complained. "Nonsense," replied Mr. Busy, and beside himself around Mr. Slow's kitchen making up a picnic for the 2 of them. He took a minute and a half. "Right, right," minute and a half. "Right," he cried when he finished. Off we go. And the bustled Mr. Slow out of his front door, and off they set. As you can imagine, Mr. Busy walks extremely quickly, and as you can imagine, Mr. Slow doesn't. So by the time Mr. Busy had walked a mile, do you know how far Mr. Slow had walked? To his own garden gate. Mr. Busy hurried back. "Come on," he cried impatiently. "Hurry up, hurry!" "Hurry up," replied Mr. Slow. "Impossible." "Oh, all right," said Mr. Busy. "We'll have a picnic. Wait a minute, though," he added. "The grass needs cutting." And he rushed back to Weekend Cottage, and rushed back again with his lawnmower, and rushed up and down cutting Mr. Slow's lawn. It took him 2.5 minutes. It would have taken him 2 minutes, but he had to mow around Mr. Slow, who couldn't get out of the way a time. Go! Oh, sorry. "Right," cried Mr. Busy. "Picnic time!" And together on that fine summer day they had a fine picnic. Well, actually, Mr. Busy had a finer picnic than Mr. Slow, because he ate more quickly and had most of the food. Mr. Busy stretched out on the grass. "That was fun," he said. "I like picnics." "You do? I don't," said Mr. Slow. "Tell you what," went on Mr. Busy, ignoring him. "Tomorrow we'll go on a proper picnic, out in the country." Mr. Slow pulled his face and went on Mr. Busy. "In order to do that you get out in the country, I'll have to call for you earlier than I did this morning." Mr. Slow pulled another face. "See you tomorrow then," said Mr. Busy. See you tomorrow then," said Mr. Busy, and went home and cleaned his house from top to bottom. The following morning Mr. Busy jumped out of bed at 5 o'clock, had a bath and cleaned his teeth, and cooked his breakfast and ate his breakfast, and read the paper, and washed up, and made his bed, and cleaned the house from top to bottom, by which time it was 6 o'clock. He went and knocked on Mr. Slow's front door. "Come on," he cried. Come on," he cried. Time to be up and about. Picnic day." No reply. "Come on," cried Mr. Busy again. No reply. Mr. Busy went inside, and went upstairs 3 at a time, and into Mr. Slow's bedroom, expecting to find him in bed, but he wasn't. And he wasn't anywhere upstairs, and he wasn't anywhere downstairs. "Father," said Mr. Busy, "I wonder he's got to. I wonder where he's got to." Where Mr. Slow had got to was under his bed. He didn't want to go on any picnic, not he. "Father," said Mr. Busy again, "that means I'll have to go on the picnic on my own." Under his bed said, "Uh-oh." Uh-oh. Under his bed, Mr. Slow smiled a slow smile. "What a good idea," he said, and went to sleep